Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Brave New Leaders, where we discuss what CEOs need to know about making strategy. And today we're going to talk about how to do better strategy offsites. Now, it's strategy season or strategy offsite season. Many of you, many companies do this at the end of the year. Some do it at the beginning of the year. Now it's a good time to prepare well. If this is the first time you're joining us, then allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Dr. Mark Snoekes. I'm a strategy advisor. I've been working with CEOs and their teams, helping them to design and execute better winning strategies for the last 20 years. Well, lots of experience working with global Fortune 500s, business units, divisions, standalone companies within larger groups, but I've also worked quite a lot with small and medium companies. And here is just a couple of the clients or the companies that I have had the pleasure of working with. Now, what are we going to do today? So, as I said, we're going to talk about how to do a better strategy offsite. So we're going to touch a lot upon why do we actually need a better strategy offsite? Why should you care about doing a better offsite? We're going to talk about what are the biggest problems and challenges that I observe when it comes to doing a good offsite. To give you a little bit of context, how I think about strategy, I will outline what I call the new rules for better strategy. And these rules for better strategy are actually going to give us the framework also for our offsite and what you need to think about when designing an offsite. And then I'll go into the details of that. So I'll outline the core components or the core pillars of a good strategy offsite. I'll show you some examples of strategy offsites. And at the end, we're going to close it with the key mistakes that you have to avoid. And I will also provide you at the very end a checklist that you will be able to download on how to design a better offset. And on top of all of this, as the news about a recession, a looming recession, are picking up, and it looks more and more likely that we will have a recession sometime in 2024. We're also going to talk about how a good strategy offsite can actually help you to prepare for the recession, because usually, once the recession hits, you don't have really 6 months time to do a strategy project. At the same time, you need a strategy so that you don't avoid panicking and running around like a bunch of headless chicken, only reacting, cutting costs randomly and jumping from one opportunity to the next that comes your way. So a good strategy can actually help you to have a recession-proof strategy, if you like. Now, if while I'm talking, you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them into the chat. And let's maybe start in the chat with where you're joining us from today, just to check that everything is actually working. So if I may kindly ask you to just put into the chat, say hi and say where you're joining us from. And if you have already any specific questions about strategy offsites, then please don't hesitate to share them, put them in the comments. And one of the most important questions that I always get is, do we get the slides? Yes, you will get the slides. So at the very end, I'm also going to I'm going to give you the link where you can actually download these slides. Now, let's talk about strategy offsite and the challenges that you have with strategy offsite. So just to do a little bit of an evaluation here. Please just put into the chat 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. How satisfied are you with the results and the impact that your typical yearly strategy offsite actually give you? So 1, very dissatisfied; 2, somewhat dissatisfied; 3, neither nor; 4, somewhat satisfied; and 5, very satisfied. Couldn't be any better. And please also maybe leave a comment or two about what is driving your satisfaction. Why did you give the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? So I'm just going to give you a moment to put these things into the chat. Yeah, Johnson is very happy. Seantan is neither nor, so there is a little bit room for improvement. Okay, so just keep them coming, and again, also add your questions and the comments you have around what makes a good or bad strategy offsite. Now, why do you need a better offsite? Now, I think an offsite is really a great opportunity to align your team on a common view about what is actually going on, your aspirations, your challenges, what you're seeing happening around you, right? And a good offsite will then also allow you later on to focus your organization on what actually matters most to drive growth, boost performance, and as I mentioned earlier, to also recession-proof your organization. And at the end of the day, if you make real, clear, actionable decisions that are actually tied to the daily business instead of just being lofty vision statements, then you will also have, if you do it right, an impact on the organization. So I really think it's a waste of time, money, and everybody's resources if you don't do a good strategy offsite and you have all the spend all the time together, and then at the end of the day, nothing actually happens. Right? So if you do an offsite, well, then really leverage it to start crafting a better strategy that can help you with lead with clarity and confidence, even in difficult times, that can help you to drive growth, boost performance, make an impact. And at the end of the day, it's also a good opportunity to start building a better business. Now, the biggest challenge that I see, the biggest problem that I see with strategy offsites is that very often there is a large disconnect between what is happening in the offsite and daily business. I'm going to talk about the mistakes, but just one of the mistakes, just to mention it, is that kind of show and tell sessions. You have everybody wants to show off what they have done last year. So you have long lists of presentations and long lists of how good everything is working. Or sometimes people, they have lots of daily challenges, but then the executive team says, no, we're not going to talk about those. Let's talk about the long-term strategy. Let's talk about the vision. And then everybody is saying, yeah, nice exercise, but we have lots of challenges that we need to solve today. So closing that gap is actually very much tied to what I call the 8 shifts towards better strategy. So if you've been following me, you know that I talk about this idea of old school strategy, traditional approaches to strategy being dead, and that we need to focus on new rules of better strategy. Again, also particularly in times of uncertainty and times of turbulence. Now, not all of these are 100% relevant to the strategy offsite, so I'm just going to pick up a couple that are most important for how to design or when designing an offsite, right? And I'm going to go into the details a little bit more later. So one of the key things here is that instead of looking or thinking about strategy as financial targets and lofty vision statements, you should really think about strategy as targeting and focusing on your most critical challenges or the highest value opportunities that lie in front of you that you can seize, that can help you to actually achieve your ambitions. And instead of, again, having financial plans for the next 3 to 5 years, you want to focus on stuff that you can actually address in the next 12 to 18 months. Again, talking about recession, that's going to be even more important. Then obviously, if you have a strategy, you want to differentiate. The core purpose of strategy is to differentiate. So you want to put innovation back into strategy instead of doing too much benchmarking, best practices, and following what others are doing. Ideally, so I know we're talking about a yearly offsite, but old school strategy is where you actually only talk about strategy during the offsite. So you have a separation of this idea of first we can think, first we can design, and then afterwards we're going to just implement that, to turning into something that is strategy, turning strategy into something that is always on and you think while you're doing. And this is also, again, a crucial point of a successful strategy offsite, is that you don't see it as a once a year thing that you do. I'm not saying you need to do an offsite every month, but I'm going to talk about how you can use the offsite actually as part of a strategy process that you can kick off with the offsite or with the preparation of the offsite, and how then really to follow through as you go along. Working behind closed boardroom doors, again, also a problem of many offsites is that it's only for the senior leaders. Maybe it's just for the C-suite, maybe it's for the C-suite and then the the next in line, if you like. But a good strategy offsite, it will involve more stakeholders. And again, I'm going to talk about how you can actually do that. And then, yeah, ideally, this is as much valid for the strategy overall as for the offsite. Again, you don't want to do too much PowerPoint during an offsite, but you want to engage your people in lively conversations. Now, I help on a daily basis organizations to achieve these shifts. So if you're interested in working with me also on a strategy offsite, then I can help you. I can support you in the design of your offsite and make sure that you really have a perfect offsite targeted at your situation. I'm going to help you to avoid the costly mistakes that I often see. We can talk about very often a key topic in offsites is how to navigate difficult political situations. And I'm really going to give you the methodology to make your offsite the most impactful offsite, I can say, that you have ever seen. And here is actually a quote for one of my recent clients where we worked on an offsite a couple of weeks ago. And she said that this was one of the best offsite she has ever had, helped them to gain clarity, the structure, facilitation of the whole thing, and how we just achieved the results. So if you're interested in something like this and you want to see results like this, then here is a one-time offer. So I help you design your strategy offsite and for a fixed fee. And the first 5 who DM me on LinkedIn now and who want to do that, they will get a 20% discount. Now, what do you get for that, or what is the results that you can see? Now, here is an example of an offsite that I did about 18 months, 2 years ago, and it was a small leadership team. We had about 8 people in this group, and we used the offsite to really kick off a process, a strategy process. So it was not a one-time event; it was a kickoff really of a larger strategy process. But the work we did here laid the foundation for a 50% increase in revenues and profit in the following 12 months. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we did during this offsite, and then we're going to go into the details and the principles that we applied to designing and running this offsite. So day one, yeah, we got together, we had a welcome introduction, and we talked about what is the ambition of the leadership team. So what do they want to achieve? And we didn't, again, not too far away. So we focused out, we zoomed out on, so where do you see the company in 3 years? We talked about what are the trends you're seeing, what's happening around you, where do you want to be as an organization in 3 years? But then we zoomed back into what does this mean for the next 12 months? So what are the challenges we're facing? What needs to happen in the next 12 months? Then in the afternoon, so in this particular case, we did a little bit more sense making and trying to understand what is actually happening around the company. So this was a global company, many markets, many regions that we wanted to look into and actually see, okay, if we look at the big picture, what is the stuff that is happening? So the first day was really more about, again, ambitions and what is happening now, what are the core challenges we need to solve. And then on the next day, we took all of that and we boiled it down into what I called a strategy backlog. So we outlined all the things that they think they should be doing, the opportunities they should be looking at, the challenges that they had in front of them, the activities, the actions, the moves they wanted to put into place. And I have a picture a little bit later that I'll show you what that could look like. And then out of that, we built what I called a strategy backlog. So we did not spend time on planning the next 3 years in detail, but we said, here is a backlog of stuff that we have to do, challenges we have to address, moves that we have to implement. But then we just picked some for a first sprint. So we created a first sprint backlog, which is, again, I'm going to show you the methodology of how we do that. But we defined what are the first things that need to happen, and then we detailed these things only in a more detailed sprint planning. And then the team went on to execute these things. And we actually so afterwards, we worked in monthly cycles where we got back together, we looked at what has happened, and then we reviewed the outcomes of these things, and we defined out of the backlog what are the next things that we need to do. But it all started with a very effective strategy offsite that launched the entire process. Right? And my approach and my methodology that I use around making strategy is what you see here. So I call that the strategy launchpad. So it's not a linear process, but it's really about spaces of strategic thinking and strategic doing that I call make sense. So this is really about understanding what is going on in the industry, in the market, but also with our current strategy within our organization. Then we go into designing your strategy. And here you see on the business level, this idea of where to play, how to win, what are the capabilities you need, and so on and so forth. And we'll also talk about activating your strategy. And as I'm going to show you in a minute, activating your strategy, it's not, don't think about it as the last part in the process where you start with make sense, you design, and then you activate your strategy. No, lots of the principles in the activate part, like involving and engaging your organization, they are already applied in the making sense and in the strategy design, and also for the offsite, as I'm going to show you. These three things are quite crucial for the offsite because that's deliverables, outcomes that you can strive for. What you want to have as part of a good offsite is you want to have a prioritized list of what are the strategic challenges and opportunities that you see. You want to have clarity around what are the strategic moves that you want to implement with a sprint backlog, for example, in the next 12 to 18 months. And you want to have a review already about what is going on now, but you also want to plan for a review of whatever it is that you're planning during the offsite. So these are already three core components that you can think about and that you can put into your offsite. Then, as I said, ideally, you don't think about this as a linear process, but you want to turn your strategy always on. You want to live your strategy on a daily basis, which means that you're constantly going through these three types of thinking and three types of activities. And while one part of the organization might be more in the sense making, others might be more in the implementation, and still others might be being more in the design. So let's have a look at these core components in a little bit more detail. Now, the first one is, so align on what strategy is actually. So what I'm presenting here now, it's maybe a little bit of a different approach to strategy. And before you start discussing the strategy, you should align on, so what do we consider being strategy? How do we define strategy in our organization? Which is very often a big area for concern, or there's lots of confusion around what it is. Right? If you have 20 people in your strategy offsite, then you probably have 20 different definitions of what strategy is. And if you don't align on, so what is strategy for us? How do we define strategy? You're going to have lots of discussions and confusion as you go through your strategy offsite. Now, my definition of strategy is that strategy is the response to the challenges that keep you from reaching your ambition. So it's a very particular definition. It's a definition that is getting more and more popular. So you might be familiar with Richard Rommel's The Crux, or the Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which he wrote, I think, about a dozen years ago, where he was the first one to introduce really this knowledge of challenge-based strategy. In the meantime, others have also picked up this idea. And I think the definition is really a great definition because it is one that works in any kind of domain. So it's not a definition that's only tied to strategy in the business context, but it works just as well in your personal life, political strategy, military strategy, whatever. And it's also a good definition for business, I think, because it applies to every level of strategy that you're talking about. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about these levels of strategy and how to structure that. But it's not something where, if you're talking about an HR strategy, you need a different definition than if you're talking about IT strategy, or if you're talking about your corporate strategy or your market strategy, and so on and so forth. It's a definition that works always. Right? So that would be my proposal, my recommendation, that you take this kind of definition to align on what strategy is. And then the idea is really that you start with the ambitions. So where do you want to get to? What is your ambition? And your ambition could be, again, talking about the recession, it could just be, we need to weather the next 12 months of recession. So that could be fine enough. So it doesn't need to be 10 years out. It doesn't need to be a long-term vision. Whatever the horizon or the time frame of your ambitions actually defines the horizon of your strategy. Then you need to think about, so what are the challenges? What is keeping us from getting there? And what is the strategy that's going to help us to overcome these challenges so that we reach our ambitions? Now, a little bit of details when it comes to aligning on ambitions. Now, typically, if you talk about ambitions, it's going to be something around these themes. So in business, it is about growth, it is about profit, it is about making an impact. So maybe you have a purpose that you want to realize. Some people then talk more about, okay, it's about succeeding today, and maybe it's about shaping tomorrow. So there is a little bit of a longer term view, but at the end of the day, it's really about staying ahead, staying relevant. That's something that I hear a lot from the CEOs that I talk to. So making sure that your company stays relevant. And again, if you're more focused or more concerned about the recession, then your ambitions might be more on that succeeding today area. So you focus on the challenges, as said, which you can also address in the next 12 to 18 months, ideally. So the concept or the idea is kind of, you can look out in terms of the ambitions for a longer term if you like to. So I call that zoom out here. But then you're zooming back into what is keeping us from reaching our ambitions in the short term. What can we actually focus on in the next 12 to 18 months? And I said earlier that very often in strategy offsites in particular, there's a large disconnect between what is being discussed in the offsite and daily business. And I've actually been in a strategy offsite where so the management had done the deliberate decision up front to say, we're not going to talk about daily problems. We really want to talk more about the strategy. We have to frame it that way. But obviously, during all the discussions, the day-to-day challenges kept on coming back, and people would say things like, yeah, it's nice to talk about where we want to be in 5 years, but we have all the supply chain issues currently. We have all the manufacturing issues currently. So people felt that disconnect, and they just felt like the whole offsite was a waste of time because they were not talking about what is really on their mind right now, what is really the problems they face right now. So here, this way, by zooming out, but then zooming back in, you can solve this particular challenge. Now, when working on the challenges, so trying to understand what is actually happening, I have a couple of maps that I use. So overall, I want to think about what's happening in your company in terms of the strategy, in terms of the organization, what's happening in the market, trends, conventions, disruptions you can talk about. You want to talk about what are different stakeholder perspectives on our business. What do customers say? What does the board say? What do shareholders say? What do suppliers and partners say? All these kind of things. Again, with the goal to boil it down to the key challenges, the key strategic questions that you need to solve. Now, here's another example of being more granular. So that's be something when we talk about what's going on in your company, all the different elements of your company, your strategy, and your organization actually that you could review and that you could think about. And in the preparation of an offsite, we can also make decisions around which of these are more relevant to your organization and which of these are less relevant. So, and then obviously, once you have the ambitions, once you have the challenges, it's about designing your strategy, again, which I defined as the response to your challenges. Now, obviously, every ambition and every challenge that you have will be quite unique to your organization. But then again, we can use strategy frameworks to help us structure our thinking about, on the one hand, the challenges, and on the other hand, also use generic strategy frameworks, I would say, as ways to think about, or paths to think about when it comes to the response. Now, so having done this for many, many years now, usually challenges, they fall into one of these levels of strategy. So there is mostly in a strategy offsite, there's corporate business level, maybe some functional level challenges that will come up, but that's about it. And it kind of you can use this to structure the challenges that you have and think about, so what level of strategy are we actually talking about, which then also is going to help you when it comes to thinking about how can we think about responses, or where could we find responses to these challenges. Very often, so business level strategy challenges, they are also due because on the corporate level, it's not clear what the corporate strategy is. For example, corporate wanting to find synergies where there are no synergies to be found, which is then going to create challenges on the business level. So you can use something like this to also dig a little bit deeper into what is the real root cause of the challenge. And as I said again, so there are many theories and frameworks around corporate level strategy, business level strategy, functional level strategy, which then you can use to come up with responses to the challenges. And one of the frameworks that I like using for the business level strategy is the playing to win, the Roger Martin playing to win strategy cascade. So again, here, if you have challenges, you can assign them or cluster them into these boxes of the 5 dimensions to figure out what is the nature of the challenge that we are facing, and again, also use this as some paths to think about when it comes to the responses. Pillar number 5. So what you want to have in your strategy offsite definitely is some element of follow through. So again, we said earlier that, and some of you mentioned in the comments, that that's a big challenge for many of you to follow through. So we had a nice offsite. We discussed high-level vision statements and stuff, and then on Monday morning everything is different again, and nobody cares about whatever was discussed in the strategy offsite. Right? So what you want to do is have an element of planning next actions and follow through. And this can look something like this. So here, as I talked about it earlier, it can be quite messy, or this looks kind of messy. But what we did here is actually that after having discussed all these challenges, after having brainstormed on potential responses and moves that the company could put in place, what we did is we created these 3 categories. So on the right hand, you have the strategic moves. So these were things that everybody agreed on. This is what we need to do. So there was no discussion. It's crystal clear to everybody that these are things that need to happen. Then in the middle, we have assumptions to validate, or opportunities, ideas to explore. So here is a little bit more unsure. So things like, okay, I believe there is an opportunity with this customer. I believe we should do this and that, but it was not 100% clear. And then on the far left, you really have lots of open questions. So what should we do about maybe a particular market where we didn't have an answer yet, a particular challenge that we didn't know how to solve yet. So that's kind of like the backlog, if you like. So this is what I called earlier the strategy backlog. And then, as you can see here, I asked participants, so this was a small team of like eight executives, I think, in this offsite. So we asked them to prioritize these things. So you have these voting dots that you see. And then we split them up in teams or pairs of 2. And each pair of 2 executives, they had the responsibility for one of these areas. And what we did then is plan so the next action steps. And I have a methodology I call the 90-21-7 that we use to plan the next quarter. So here we plan for the next 90-day outcomes. So we take the stuff from these strategic moves here and the assumptions that they needed to validate and the questions that they needed to answer. So we pick those that we prioritize. And by the way, I have tools and frameworks like the 4 types of strategic moves, or the strategy triage that can help you to prioritize these things. And then for each of these things we define. So after a quarter, what would we like to have achieved as an outcome? We break that down into 4 sprints of 3 weeks, basically to say what are the intermediary results that we need to achieve so that we make the outcome at the end of the quarter. And 4 sprints of 21 days gives you 84 days. So you have 1 week of buffer actually at the end to catch up if you need to. And then we define really the details of the first 7 days of activities. So the team can use that then to track whether they are actually on track, whether they are making progress towards these results and towards these outcomes. And if you're interested to learn more about this, just head over to sneakers.com/9021/7, where you can find a free course. So I have a short video explaining how this works, and you have a template that you can download. Now, if we leave the strategy offsite with something like this, we can use that afterwards to do our strategy reviews. And during a strategy review, there's always 4 things that I like to discuss. First of all, action. Are we doing what we committed to? So I think it's not enough to do management by results, where you only check the results, and you have 90 days, you plan the outcomes, you plan the results. If you don't happen to reach your objectives, then it is too late. So you want to also track the input, and that's the actions or the activities that you planned on doing, and look at whether you are actually doing these things or not. Then obviously at some point, maybe not the first week, but after a couple of weeks, you want to check the results. You want to see whether whatever you planned, you're hoping for, the results that you were hoping for are actually materializing, whether your strategy is working or not. Then what you also want to discuss is new insights. So you want to think about anything that comes up that makes it necessary to adjust our strategy. So again, let's stay with the example of the recession. Maybe it's worse than you thought. Maybe it's not as bad as you thought. And then think about, what does that mean for our strategy, and how can we adjust? New challenges that come up, new insights that come up, new opportunities that come up that you might need to take into account. And the 4th thing that I always want to discuss during a strategy review is, what's the mood regarding strategy in the organization? Is everybody still confident that this is the right way to go? Is everybody still committed to it? Or are people starting to have doubts about the strategy, and so on and so forth, which then again, you might need to address. And for each of these questions, it's a simple yes, no, and why. If it's not working, why is it not working? What are, again, the issues, the problems, the bottlenecks? So going back to that definition of strategy as the response to the challenges that keep you from reaching your ambitions, it also works on this level actually to think about what are the problems we have and what is our strategy for overcoming these things. Now, so these are the 5 components of the content of your strategy offsite. So that aligning on the strategy, what is strategy, thinking about ambitions, thinking about challenges, the strategy, and the activation part. Now, how do I go about when it comes to designing the offsite? So again, as I said, you should not think about the offsite as a standalone event, really, but it is about, when you're designing it, there is an opportunity to involve the larger organization in this. You could do a survey, for example, on what are the challenges and opportunities that people throughout the organization observe currently. What are the important things that they have unclarity about, where they say, we need an answer to this. Lots of executives, when they ask me about strategy, and I ask them about, why do you think you need a strategy? They say, well, people from throughout the organization keep asking around. So why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? What is our strategy? What are our priorities? So you can use the preparation of the offsite to gain knowledge about all these things that the company is actually talking about. Then, so obviously when you deliver it, we talked about the 5 core components, and then you also want to plan for the follow-up or the follow-through afterwards. So you want to plan already ahead of the offsite, the strategy review meetings and processes you're going to be putting into place. Which brings me to the 4 mistakes that you really should avoid. So these are really the killers of a good strategy offsite. So first of all, if you don't have a process, or you don't see the offsite as being part of a process. So if it's a standalone event, it could be a very nice event. It's nice to get together. It's nice to see your colleagues again, but it's not really going to be a very effective offsite in that sense. Next biggest mistake I see is what I call the show and tell session. So it's really, as I said earlier, presentation after presentation from every market, every business unit, every department or function, maybe about how great the last year was, what has been achieved, and some ideas maybe about what they want to do next year, which results then in the laundry list type of strategy, which is not really strategy, long lists of things that everybody should be doing or that you think you will be doing, no real priorities, no real kind of logic that ties all these things together. The third killer to a good offsite is, as we discussed already a little bit earlier, the disconnect from what is really going on in the business and going on around you. So if it's really just about, as I said, this team that asked me to do let's just think about the long term. We're not going to think about what's going on today. We want to use the opportunity to think freely, blah, 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 blah. Nice, but people will not perceive that as a very impactful offsite. And then the fourth mistake that you make is no involvement of anybody in the preparation and the design of the offsite. So even not the participants. So very often I experience teams who want to kind of keep the preparation of the offsite among themselves. So you might have somebody from HR very often, somebody from marketing, somebody from communication, maybe somebody from strategy if you happen to have a strategy department. And usually these people sit in headquarters and then they say, well, here is what we think we should be discussing, but they have no clue or no involvement of what is really important for the participants that actually coming to the offsite, what they want out of the offsite, which then in turn is also going to result in participants being very passive during an offsite because they have not been involved in the creation. They have not participated in the creation of the offsite. They will not really participate in the offsite as such. So watch out for these 4 killers to a good strategy offsite. Now, again, if you'd like me to help you and support you with the offsite, feel free to reach me or DM me here on LinkedIn, or you can also just email me. Good. So time for some questions. So that was a lot of me talking. So I just want to have a look at a couple of the questions that you put into the chat. So if you have more questions now that I've outlined my approach to designing a better offsite, please feel free to put them there. And then after the questions, I'll wrap it up and I'll give you my checklist for a better offsite, and I'll tell you where you can actually download the slides. So Paul asks here, for example, do you start from scratch on day one, or what have you done in advance? Yeah, so as I said, in advance, you want to have some preparation. You want to involve the team or the participants, at least ideally the larger organization, in collecting input and stuff that you need, right? If you know already that here are the particular challenges that you want to discuss, it can also help if you have research on what is going on in the market, trends, for example, customer satisfaction surveys. These are things that you can prepare upfront, and then you can bring to the strategy offsite. Right? If you feel like if we just open it up, all the challenges is going to be too much, obviously you can make a selection of challenges upfront, and then again prepare some background information on these challenges, and then during the offsite you can use the team to prioritize, for example, to discuss what's really going on, trying to get to the root cause of these things. Another question by Paul. So market, including customers and competitors. Yeah, so whatever is relevant, right? So yes, market, obviously what's going on in the market is competitors. It is about customers. If you're seeing changing customer behavior, for example, if that's relevant, if you're perceiving something here that needs to be discussed, then of course that's stuff that you should be discussing. Okay, let's see. I don't see any other questions. Is there anything else that is coming up in the comments? Let me briefly check. Yeah, seems like that was all the questions you had. So if you have more questions, please just feel free to add them to the comments. I also see a comment about the recording. Yeah, so the recording, as with every LinkedIn Live, it's going to live here on LinkedIn. So if you use the same link to get back here, you can see the recording. Good. So then if there are no more questions, and as I said, if you have more questions, just feel free also to reach out, put them here in the comments, and I will answer them afterwards. So here's my checklist for a better strategy offsite. So you have involved the organization in the preparation. Your offsite design includes these 5 elements that we talked about. The offsite itself is interactive. We haven't spoken too much about the design techniques and how people work together in the offsite, but what you want to have is, what I always have is interactive activities. So it's not about just sitting there and listening to presentations, but when I do an offsite, people actually have to work. You have the pre-offsite process, so at least that collecting topics, challenges that you might need to discuss, asking participants about their expectations, informing them about what's going to happen. So that's also a way to involve people, maybe getting feedback on an early draft version of your offsite design from people, all these things that make them more participate in the design and then eventually also in the delivery of the offsite. You have designed a post-offsite follow-through process. So, and not just we're going to send out the slides afterwards, but really that strategy review process. And ideally, you actually work with an expert that can help you design, facilitate, and also do these follow-throughs. Just see a question by Alex. So what size of company does this work best with? I've done it for companies with 20 people. I've done it with companies with 8,000 people, 10,000 people, or business units within larger groups that had these many people. So it really works throughout. So I really think that there is no size where it doesn't work, actually, right? So obviously, as larger as they get, the more logistics are involved. I've done strategy offsites with just the executive team where we had 8, 9 people, and I've done these strategy retreats with 100 people. I think the largest one was actually 200 people, where we had large rooms, but the principles apply, the principles stay the same. We work on these 5 core elements, and then obviously, if you have more people in the room, you need more logistics about all these interactive activities. But even there, so even if you have 150, 200 people in the room, you can design something that is very interactive instead of just having people sit there and just listen. Right? How do you involve and accumulate everybody's input and still have a focus for the offsite strategy session? Well, so you can collect all the input. Obviously, there are going to be themes, recurring themes, topics that emerge. So that's going to help you with prioritization. And then you can always ask the executive to prioritize what do they think are the most important topics that need to be discussed. And as I said, so I have a couple of tools that help you to prioritize what these most important topics actually could be. So that it's not really just, well, it's not only a gut feeling or intuition, but you can actually do that in a more sophisticated way, let's say, to focus on the really important topics. Cool. So we're almost at the end. So if you like this and you want to have more and you want to participate in other LinkedIn Lives, so this one was one obviously that I did alone. The next 2, I'm going to have a guest. And so we have one on November 28th where I have Simon with me. Now, Simon is an expert when it comes to sales strategy and go-to-market strategy. So we're going to talk about that type of strategy, but we're also going to talk about how the stuff that I usually talk about, so the better strategy as the bigger picture, how that is a prerequisite actually for having a good sales strategy. And then on December 5th, I have Jurate with me, who is a non-executive board member and board chair. And we're going to talk about strategy in the boardroom. So we're going to look at what is the board's role in strategy, what are the board's expectations when it comes to strategy. So if you want to participate in these 2, you'll find the links again on my LinkedIn profile under the events tab, and feel free to just sign up and join us there. Good. So with that said, last thing, I promised you the slides and that checklist. So if you go to snookercast.com/better-offsite, you can download today's slides and including the checklist that I shared. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out. So that's it from my side. I hope it was valuable. If so, please leave a comment. If you didn't find it was valuable, then also leave a comment and let me know what I can do better. Thanks a lot for being here with me today, and see you soon.